Wembley Stadium, the Colosseum of association football, hosted the 8th FIFA World Cup final on the 30th of July 1966. In the birthplace of the game, this day proved to be the biggest success story in the history of English football. It also served to highlight the growing impetus of FIFA, now under the direction of Englishman Sir Stanley Rouse.
Throughout the world, association football is steadily growing in popularity. There are more than 130 national associations in membership with FIFA, and international competitions are being played regularly at all levels.
Who could have imagined that such a simple game would grow into a world phenomenon? How could a pastime invoke so much pride, passion and emotion, not to mention drama and excitement? It was all encapsulated on that day in 1966 when a last-minute German goal from Weber cut short English celebrations to take the final into extra time. But it would prove only a temporary impediment to a fairy tale ending. Geoff Hurst put England 3-2 up. The controversy still a topic of discussion even today. And Hurst went on to complete the first ever FIFA World Cup final hat-trick to win the game 4-2. But only 20 years earlier, this success seemed inconceivable after the British associations had left FIFA during the 1920s after an argument over the amateur game. By 1946, Rouse had helped to negotiate their return, and in 1961, he was made FIFA president. A former referee, Rouse will always be remembered as the man who simplified the laws of football. Whilst these laws have been added to and amended over the years, the basics remain intact.
When I entered FIFA now, it's practically 29 years ago, I was also of the opinion we shall change something because we must make the game or the laws a little bit more attractive. But once in this community I've realized, keep the game as it is easy to understand by everybody.
It's the very origins of these rules that take us on a world tour, beginning in Britain. Of course, traditional English football had always been more about participation than spectating. During medieval times, like many other places around the world, Britain had mob games. Go to Ashbourne in northern England on what's called Shrove Tuesday, and you'll find football as it once was. The clothes may have changed, but the game is just the same as it was in the dim and distant past. But in Britain, this sort of mob football leapt class barriers. From the Middle Ages onwards, public schools sprang up around England. And football games were as popular then with the children as they are now. From the end of the 18th century onwards, enlightened headmasters began to channel their boys' energy into these manly and athletic games. Football was officially approved, and schools such as Eton, Rugby and Harrow developed their own games. Here at Harrow, they still play with their own rules today. Even the universities were playing by their own code. At Trinity College, Cambridge in 1848, a meeting was convened by one H.C. Malden with the intention of creating a common set of rules amongst students who come up from the major football-playing schools. The Cambridge rules would form the cornerstone for the establishment of the modern game. But still, all across England, football was being played in different and varied forms. The Industrial Revolution had created greater leisure time for the city dwellers, and in hotspots such as Sheffield, football was fast becoming the favourite pastime. Established in 1857 and recognised today as the oldest football club in the world, local amateur side Sheffield FC, along with other clubs in the city, played under their own rules, different to the various public schools and the Cambridge rules. But the march towards a unified football code was fast becoming unstoppable. In October 1863, the Football Association gathered for the first of a series of meetings in London. The location, the Freemasons' Tavern in Great Queen Street. The agenda, to thrash out the rules under which the clubs would play. The divide came between those who wanted to handle the ball and those who preferred kicking it.
Those against?
The handling men, influenced by the game played at rugby school, didn't get their way. In December 1863, they left to follow their own destiny. The Football Association founded the FA Cup in 1871. This was still the age of the old school player, the gifted amateurs from privileged backgrounds. But soon their dominance was challenged by a new trend, the working class professional. In 1879, Darwin FC fielded Fergus Souter, a Glaswegian stonemason who was paid to make the move south to Lancashire. By 1885, this practice had become so widespread, the FA was forced to sanction the payment of footballers. And by 1888, 12 of the professional teams started their own league. At the end of that first league season, Preston North End had become champions, and having also won the FA Cup, became the first team ever to complete a league and cup double. Only 25 years after the birth of the game, football had become a fully professional sport. But it was the British Empire and the development of trade routes which took the game to mainland Europe and beyond. In Spain, Athletic Club de Bilbao was formed in 1898 after English sailors brought the game to the Basque port. A group of Englishmen formed the Milan Cricket and Football Club in 1899. Today they play as AC Milan at the impressive San Siro Stadium. The club's crest still sports the cherished date and a very English motif. In North America, the game was developing. It was here on Boston Common back in 1862 that the first recorded game of organized football took place in the United States. The USA would go on to progress to the semi-finals of the inaugural FIFA World Cup tournament in 1930. But the 1950 FIFA World Cup in Brazil is still without doubt the Americans' finest hour. The tournament was the strongest yet, and the USA faced one of the favourites, England, in the group stages. England may not have fielded their strongest side, but the result created one of football's biggest shocks. The USA defeated the inventors of the game 1-0. Elsewhere in North America, Mexico was embracing the game. In 1901, English miners founded Pachuca FC, the first organized soccer club in Mexico. The country itself is North America's most successful, having qualified for 12 FIFA World Cup finals. 2 of which they've hosted themselves, the second in 1986, in the face of great adversity. 8 months before the finals were set to take place, a powerful earthquake shook Mexico City to its foundations. The destruction left thousands dead, over 100,000 homeless. How could they stage this great event under such traumatic circumstances and with an infrastructure so badly damaged?
It was the greatest trauma that Mexico has ever experienced in all its history of earthquakes. Hosting the World Cup served to bring some happiness, despite the huge feeling of sadness that filled us all because of the many dead people and fallen buildings. And I think we all wanted to host the World Cup rather than cancel it. It was what we needed to pick up our spirits. And luckily the Mexican team played really well.
The events preceding this FIFA World Cup underlined just how far football had become an integral part of Mexico's culture. It gave a chance for the people of Mexico City to unite in grief. Yet it also gave them a sense of hope and a channel of escapism. Their opening 2-1 victory against Belgium was the perfect tonic for a country still in mourning. In South America, football has become a way of life. In Palermo Park in central Buenos Aires, they were playing football as early as 1867. It was here Scottish engineers kicked a ball for the first time. The British connection to Argentinian football runs deep. In 1903, Newell's Old Boys was established, named after Don Isaac Newell, an English gentleman who'd set up a school in Rosario during the late 1800s. In Brazil, having been impressed by the touring side Corinthians from England, a group of working-class enthusiasts from a Sao Paulo suburb formed the sport club Corinthians Paulista in 1910. They even sported the same colours as their English namesake: white shirts, dark shorts. And in Asia, expats were instrumental in the formation of clubs all over the region, with locals setting up their own teams in response. In Calcutta, Mohun Bagan was one of the biggest clubs set up by the local population. Today, over 100,000 fans regularly pack the stadium, and games are passionate to say the least, especially against city rivals East Bengal and Mohammedan Sporting. Of course, some civilizations have been playing ball games for centuries. In China, they played a game called Suju, which involved two teams kicking a ball through a target suspended above the arena. And in Henan province, the cradle of Chinese civilization, this column documents the life of an official who lived in the Han Dynasty 2,000 years ago. His love for the game Suju is recorded on these carvings. In Japan, they still play something similar. This is Kemari, a Japanese temple game, a tradition that's kept alive today. When association football arrived in East Asia, it didn't take long to catch on. In fact, the first international match between the Philippines and China took place as early as 1913. It was that year that Manila hosted the Far Eastern Games, a sort of local Olympics. China and Japan also took part, and by 1934, so too did the Dutch East Indies. In 1938, the Dutch East Indies, today known as Indonesia, became the first Asian team ever to take part in the FIFA World Cup. A 6-0 defeat to the eventual finalists Hungary was no disgrace. South Korea made it to the 1954 FIFA World Cup finals in Switzerland less than a year after suffering a devastating war. Unsurprisingly, they took a 9-0 hiding off Hungary before this 7-0 defeat to Turkey. For a region with such a long tradition in the game, Asia had made very little impact. But 12 years later in England, Asian football finally made its mark. Nobody really knew too much about North Korea, let alone their style of football.
When we first arrived in England, nobody quite knew what to make of us. They didn't know much about us, and I think we were just short, yellow strangers to all of them.
The North Koreans were expected to pose few problems for twice world champions Italy. The Azzurri needed just a point to progress to the next round.
When we defeated the Italian team 1-0, it was fantastic. And it reminded us of what our great leader had said to us before our departure. He'd said, "It is certainly an honor for you to participate in the World Cup as representatives of Asian countries. However, it would be even more honorable if you could manage to win a couple of matches."
In the quarter-finals against Portugal, the Koreans looked to be heading towards another shock win, going 3-0 up inside the first 25 minutes.
We were playing against Argentina, and we were playing at Wembley, and they kept putting the score up behind the goals, and it came up 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, and I'm shouting at our kid, "Hey, have you seen the result up there?"
Portugal regrouped to produce one of the all-time comebacks, eventually winning 5-3. The focus turned from the heroic Asians to African-born Eusebio, who scored 4 of Portugal's 5 goals.
I think that the game against Korea was outstanding. We were on the pitch, and we were the only ones who believed that we could make a comeback. Most people thought that Portugal had been defeated, and that was it. But it was my day. As we say in Portugal, it was Eusebio's day.
Eusebio originally hailed from Mozambique. The African country had been a Portuguese colony for almost 5 centuries. Although Portugal lost in the semi-final to England, the 1966 FIFA World Cup heralded the emergence of Eusebio as a football superstar. He may have represented Portugal, but it highlighted the riches Africa could offer, the world game. Football had in fact been flourishing since the turn of the century across Africa. In the Gold Coast, now Ghana, Hearts of Oak were formed in Accra, a thoroughly British name for a thoroughly African club. Founded in 1911 by youngsters from the Usha town district, they're among the oldest clubs in Africa. But amazingly, Africa had to wait until 1978 before winning their first game at a FIFA World Cup. Tunisia, the 1,000-to-1 tournament outsiders, defeated Mexico 3-1. They would also go on to draw with the defending champions Germany. But Africa is still waiting for the ultimate success, despite having representatives at the FIFA World Cup finals as early as 1934.
I'm predicting 2010, when the World Cup will be hosted in the African continent, that you have maybe 100 and something thousand spectators in the stadia, and then billions of people in the world watching on television. I think that would be a great show in the African continent that I always pray that this thing becomes successful and an African country wins that the World Cup in 2010.
But sometimes winning doesn't seem that important. In 1993, Zambia were on their way to play a FIFA World Cup qualifying match against Senegal when their plane crashed, killing everyone on board. At first, the whole nation was paralyzed with grief. But such was their passion for football, the Zambians decided to continue in their quest to get to the 1994 finals in the USA. And in front of a packed, emotional stadium in Lusaka, they won their next qualifier, 2-1, against Morocco. For their coach that day, Freddie Mwila, football will always unite the people of Zambia.
The best way we mix is to play in the community, you know. We wrap up little balls, tennis balls. It has no tribe on it. It's a small ball, and it bounces all over, and that brings us together. And this is how you see everybody involved, regardless of tribe, regardless of wherever they come from. We all meet and look at that football, and it unites Zambia.
Those players who so tragically had their lives taken away will forever be a symbol of the impact of the game here. Everywhere you go in Africa, football is seen as a positive force. In Liberia, a country racked by internal conflict, their most famous son is a footballer. In fact, he's the first African player to be crowned FIFA World Player of the Year. It doesn't matter who you are or what political leanings you have. One of the few things that everyone agrees on here is that George Weah is a hero.
It was very important that none of us turn our back on our nation. True sports will bring about unification and reconciliation, and also we brought about peace.
The impact the game can have is not lost on Weah. That's why he invests much of his own personal time and money into the development of football here, both at grassroots and at national level. When Liberia play, it's one of the few occasions when everyone is focused on a common cause. There's not one part of the globe that hasn't been influenced by football. Even here, in the Amazon rainforests, where cultures and civilizations have been relatively untouched by the influences of modern-day society, football still has a strong presence, because in essence, football has no social or economic boundaries. And it doesn't matter if you're traveling at latitude or altitude. In the Peruvian Andes, you'll find a small town of Cerro de Pasco. So what's so special about this mining district? Well, at 4,340 meters above sea level, Cerro de Pasco is home to the highest stadium in the world. It's where Union Minas play their football. Founded in 1974, the club plays in the Peruvian National League, their name derived from the local industry. FIFA is determined that the game should continue to flourish the world over. The Goal project is the brainchild of Joseph S. Blatter. The aim is to provide financial assistance to the poorer member associations. Jordan in the Middle East was one of the first countries to benefit. Money from the Goal project has helped to construct more grass pitches, which amazingly were only introduced as late as 1993.
There is not one single country in the world where the game is not played. It's not only a universal game, it's also a universal language. You can compare it to music, melodies. Everybody understands music and melodies and likes them. It's like football.
And like music, football has broken through national and cultural boundaries. After all you need is a few friends and a ball. And maybe not even a ball. Today, one of Africa's riches is raw football talent, and those with ability can reap the benefits as clubs from some of the world's richer countries invest in their future. Of course, the argument is that too much of this talent is being tempted abroad. But undoubtedly, the exodus to the big leagues makes for stronger national sides. Senegal have been one such success story in recent years. The starting 11 that would represent Senegal at the 2002 FIFA World Cup finals all played their club football in France. This trip during the qualifiers to their homeland was something of a rarity for these stars. They might not play domestically in Senegal, but representing their country means the world to these players. And their experience gained in France has helped them turn their beloved national team into a force in international football. However, whilst the continued movement of players across continents has benefited smaller and poorer nations, there have been knock-on effects elsewhere.
Europe is where the money is, so European clubs can afford to buy the best African players and the best South American players. The national teams can suffer from that situation because the foreign players can sometimes limit homegrown talent and restrict locally born players opportunities to get experience at the top level. But that's one of the things we have to face today. It's one of the consequences of globalization. Let's see what happens.
Globalization has even had an impact in the cradle of the game. Go to any of the top Premier League clubs in England and you'll find that most teams have an array of foreign international stars. And in some cases, a foreign manager. Once Britain took the game across the world, now the world is having a major influence on the game in Britain. The Twin Towers of Wembley Stadium were not only a symbol of England's football supremacy, but of Britain's imperial power. Both are now but a distant memory as Wembley and football head towards a new era. But as the game continues to move forward, it's worth remembering where it all started.